Little girl knocked. They beat my mama, she is dying. What the lonely rancher did ruined them. The rope creaked like a throat trying to swallow a scream. Lantern light flickered across a one-room cabin, painting the floorboards in trembling gold, and the wind pushed grit under the door until it hissed like angry snakes. Boots crunched outside, one pair, then two, then three, circling. A woman lay on the bed, breath shallow and wet, one eye purpled shut, cheek split. Her name was Mara Dale, 32, with dark chestnut hair matted by blood and dust. A silver locket pressed into her palm as if it still held a prayer. A little girl, June, 8, with wide storm-grey eyes and braids undone, stood on a stool, working at the window latch with fingers that shook so hard they tapped the pane like hail. "Go," Mara whispered, voice shredding. "Find the rancher," the one past the arroyo. "Eli Graves, tell him they'll come back." June nodded, swallowed, and slipped into the night. The door behind her thudded once from inside. A bar dropped into place. Out on the flats the sky was a black iron pan, stars like cold nails, and the town was a smudge of lanterns far to the west. She ran. Sagebrush clawed at her skirts. Coyotes yipped far off. Behind her, at the cabin she'd just fled, laughter scraped the wind, men with voices like dull saws. 2 miles on, June reached the weathered gate of a lonely ranch where a sign hung crooked, Graves and none. She beat her small fists on the door until the knuckles went raw. The door opened on a man big as a doorframe. Eli Graves, 48, sun-cracked skin, iron-grey beard trimmed close, a scar splitting the right eyebrow like a lightning strike. He wore a worn denim duster, a sweat-salted hat shoved back, and he held a lantern that made his blue eyes look like chips of ice. "They beat my mama," June said, breathless. "She is dying." Eli's jaw clenched. He looked past her to the night as if listening for what it carried. Boots' laughter, the smell of kerosene riding the wind. "Who?" he asked. "Silas Mott," she said, and the name landed like a shovel in a grave. "He wants our deed. He said the river is his." Eli's lantern light trembled along the porch boards. In the bunkhouse shadow, the rope of a saddle swung and creaked, as if the ranch itself was thinking. He set the lantern on a post, reached for his Colt peacemaker and a Winchester that had seen battle, and said to the girl, "Stay behind me. Whatever comes, you keep your head low." From the dark, a coyote yowled, and under it there came the slow, sure crunch of boots approaching the ranch gate. Who in God's dust was bold enough to follow her this far tonight? Terfuta. Earlier that evening, the cabin had smelled of chicory and wood smoke. Then Silas Mott arrived with his 2 hounds, Rook and Pike, and the air turned to kerosene and fear. Silas was 35, lean, sharp-cheeked, a viper smile under a road-dust mustache. He wore a black oilskin coat that drank lantern light, and on his right hand a brass ring shaped like a jawbone. He liked to knock before breaking doors, said it made men honest, said it made women pray. Mara had stood straight, chin lifted though she shook. "The river runs through God's land," she told him. "What doesn't belong to God belongs to no man." Silas chuckled. "Then I'll be the exception on both counts." He placed the deed on the table, smoothed it like a lover smoothing a hem, and tapped where he wanted her name. When she refused, he nodded at Rook. The punch that followed was careful, measured, like a blacksmith testing a blade, because Silas hated bruises that didn't tell the right story. Pike held the lantern closer, heat prickling Mara's skin as the light crawled. The rope around the bedpost creaked when they looped it, and Mara tasted iron in her mouth. Every boot scuff, every laugh, every flicker from that lantern wrote itself into June's memory and into Eli's future, before the little girl climbed out the rear window and ran. Silas's game was slow pressure. He talked while he hurt people, asking questions with answers he already owned. "Sign and y'all can sleep," he purred, jawbone ring dully flashing. "Refuse and you'll dream forever." Mara spat blood on the floorboards and smiled like a saint daring fire. She slammed her heel down on Pike's shin, ripped free of the rope and grabbed the lantern by its bail. For a brief, holy instant, the room was all light and motion. Kerosene sloshed, flame licked. Pike yelped and flailed it out. Rook swore. Silas's hand shot. The ring kissed Mara's cheekbone, and the world fragmented into brightness and ringing. She fell. He leaned and hissed, "You hear that other set of boots? That's the law walking away from this place." When June didn't answer his calls, Silas realized a window was empty. He smiled, thin as a razor. "Smart little rabbit," he murmured. "Rook, fetch. Pike, clean up our saint." Back at Eli's ranch, the boots at the gate belonged to Rook, a slab-shouldered brute with a nose flattened in 3 places and a voice like gravel poured through a funnel. He whistled low. "I can smell the rabbit," he called across the yard. "And I brought a message for the old man." The night tightened. Lantern light fluttered over Eli's knuckles. He stepped onto the porch, June behind his leg, and said, "You deliver it at your peril, son." The rope on the saddle creaked once more, like a judge's chair leaning forward to hear a verdict. Thunder crawled low across the hills, and the first fat drops of rain struck the dust. Eli Graves didn't talk much. Words could betray a man, same as a friend or a horse. But when he spoke, they carried. "Tell Silas he's trespassed his last trespass," he said. "Tell him the river doesn't belong to men who bleed it for profit. It belongs to those who water their dead with it." Rook grinned, showing a gap like a missing fence slat. "Silas says you used to be somebody," he jeered. "Then your wife died and made you nobody." The lantern's flame guttered. The wind pulled at it, made it bow. Eli's eye narrowed on that moving light, then lifted to Rook's shadow where the rifle barrel glinted dull. In another life, Eli had stood at Peña Place and watched a ridge turn to gunsmoke, then to widows. He'd promised a dying man he wouldn't raise a rifle except to defend a home. He figured tonight qualified. He set the lantern down on the porch rail. The light made a trembling trail on his scar. His right hand slid, easy as a man tying a knot, to the colt at his hip. "You got one chance to walk," he said. Rook lifted his own gun. Boots crunched behind him. Another pair. Pike had arrived, kerosene smell thin and acrid on his coat. He had a knife that looked purpose-built to settle arguments. "We ain't here to talk," Pike said. "Just to take. The girl. The deed." June's small fingers found Eli's duster and held. He felt the pressure like a spark on dry tinder. He didn't aim for glory. He aimed to keep a promise to a stranger's child. The first shot was a whip crack turned to lightning by the lantern flare. Eli's colt bucked once, and Rook's hat flipped off like a struck crow. He staggered, swore, fired wild. The porch post splintered, lantern dancing, rope creaking on the saddle like a startled gasp. Pike rushed the steps, knife low. Eli kicked. The rail. The lantern tumbled, swinging by its hook, throwing a strobe of fire across the yard. In that flicker he saw the knife, the grin, the future, and he shot the knife hand through. Bone rang like struck iron. Pike fell to his knees, howling. Rook steadied, shouldered his rifle. Eli stepped sideways, took the hit in the coat. Hot. Punched that stole breath, then shouldered the Winchester and sent a slug that folded Rook at the waist. The man lay groaning in dirt that drank the rain like first blessings. Eli reloaded by feel. "June," he said, voice steady. "Go inside. Pack warm clothes. Water. We ride to your mother. We ride now." The wind shoved at the clouds and the rain thickened, drumming on the porch roof, sizzling on the lantern glass. Eli shoved spare shells in chamber and belt. He knelt, grabbed Pike's collar and hissed in his ear, "Tell Silas I'm coming with the river at my back." He hauled Pike to his feet and flung him toward the gate. "Run." Pike ran, clutching his ruined hand, his boots slapping mud like a metronome ticking toward midnight. Eli swung into the saddle. The leather creaked, the rope brushed his boot, the horse snorted impatience. June climbed up in front, small body pressed against his chest, and he wrapped her in his duster. The lantern guttered on the porch, light bowing like a prayer in a storm. He turned the horse toward the black horizon. "Friend," Eli murmured to no one and everyone, "the fight's only just beginning." Lightning split the sky, and for an instant the land looked carved in bone. Then darkness swallowed it, and they rode straight into it. The cabin's lantern flickered hard when Eli and June reached it, as if the flame itself was afraid. The roof drummed with rain. Water snaked down the warped boards and pooled under the threshold. The door hung cracked on one hinge, rope dragging a slow, sad line across the floor like a snake that had forgotten its body. Mara lay where she'd fallen. Her breathing fluttered in short, sharp scraps, and her split cheek had crusted the pillow brown. But her eyes, one ruined purple, one iron clear, opened when June knelt and whispered, "Mama, I brought him." Mara's gaze moved to Eli. There was appraisal there, and trust and the ache of a woman who knew she might not get another sunrise. Eli swallowed and set to work fast. Water, cloth, a quick brace made from a sword slat to steady cracked ribs. "You hold this," he told June. "You talk to her. Keep her with us." He stepped to the doorway and stared into the curtained rain. Boots crunched. More than two. Silas Mott himself, the black oilskin shining, hat-brim dripping like a blade. Behind him strode Rook, bandaged and ugly, and three fresh shadows with rifles. Silas carried no gun in hand. He preferred to talk a man into setting his own gallows. "Evening, Eli," he said softly. "I was wondering when your ranch would wake. Heard your bones creak from here." "Your boys left their manners on my porch," Eli replied. "Winchester low but ready. I returned them without thanks." Silas smiled, that thin razor cut. "You've been a ghost too long," he said. "Time to lay down." Eli set the rifle across the doorframe, its barrel steady as a church rail. "This house is a sanctuary," he said. "You cross the threshold, you don't leave the same man." Silas tipped his head. Rain dripped off the jawbone ring, beading like pearls on a lie. "Pike said you're coming with the river at your back. I brought a dam." He stepped aside. Two men dragged a keg forward, tar-smeared and heavy. Kerosene or worse. "We'll smoke the saints out." Eli's stomach went iron. He needed time. He needed a miracle shaped like a plan. He glanced back. Mara's hand in June's, their fingers white with clinging. Lantern light licked the walls like a nervous tongue. The rope by the bedpost creaked when the wind shouldered the cabin. He drew a breath and made himself a promise. If he bled tonight, he'd bleed in the doorway, not in retreat. "Rook," Silas called. "Light it." Rook struck a match. The flare hissed and threw his ruined face into a wicked mask. Eli raised the rifle. The shot cracked loud as judgment and shattered the match to darkness. Rook cursed. Another match scraped. Eli dove left, pulled Mara's fallen lantern to him, sloshed it, and rolled it toward the doorway as a decoy while he snatched a second, hidden under the table, and lobbed it through the rain at the men hauling the keg. Glass burst. Kerosene kissed fire. The night blossomed into sudden day. Orange tongues, black smoke, men stumbling. The keg wobbled, dropped, spilled fire that slithered toward Boots like a living thing with hunger. "Now!" Eli barked. June shoved the makeshift brace tighter. Mara gritted against the pain. Eli burst from the door, firing the Winchester in measured, merciless punctuation. One man spun and fell. Another shrieked, coat aflame, rolling in the mud. Rook charged with a bull bellow. Eli sidestepped, catching a glancing swing that split his lip and set stars crooked in his eyes. He answered with the butt of the rifle to Rook's temple. Rook sagged. Silas didn't flinch. He moved like a dancer through the rain, knife flashing. He slashed Eli's forearm, white pain hot and immediate. Eli stumbled, the world collapsing to lantern flicker and rope creak and the wet rasp of his own breath. Silas's voice was almost tender. "Give me the girl." Eli spat blood. "Come and ask her yourself." Silas lunged. They met in the doorway, and for a moment the two men were a single dark shape, wrestling in the lit throat of the cabin. The knife kissed Eli's ribs. The Colt boomed in reply and scorched Silas's coat. The wind blew hard. The flame guttered. The room tilted. June screamed, small and high, and it split the night like a bell. Eli drove Silas backward with the mass of his body, boot heels carving trenches in the threshold mud. They crashed against the keg that hadn't burst, skidding it. Silas twisted free, smiling that snake smile even with blood wetting his side. "You're slow, old man." "Slow's steady," Eli said, and headbutted him hard enough to make the jawbone ring clap against Silas's teeth. Silas reeled and shouted, "Finish it!" Beyond the firelight, more boots crunched. The rain, suddenly, began to ease, just enough for the last spark to find the dry fuse trailing from the second keg. The fuse sizzled like a rattler. Eli saw it, saw the keg's tar seam, saw what the night would look like if he let it choose the end. He grabbed the burning thread, pinched, hissed, burned. Pain skittered up his arm like lightning. He twisted the fuse off and flung it into the mud where it died with a bitter sigh. Silas came again, knife first, and Eli let him. He stepped in, the way you step into a wave ready to break on you. and took the blade through the sleeve of his duster into flesh. He rapped Silas's wrist, crushed, and the knife fell with a sound like a small truth hitting wood. "You talk men into hanging themselves," Eli said, voice a gravel prayer. "But I don't take orders from the gallows." Silas groped for his pistol. Eli didn't give him time. He hammered him once across the jaw and twice across the pride, and Silas dropped to both knees in the wet dirt, breath coming in little unbelieving barks. He looked up into the doorway, into June's stare, into Mara's iron eye, then spat pink and laughed. "Kill me then," he said. "Do it in front of the saint and the rabbit. Make the river yours." Eli stood over him, rain purling on the brim of his hat, blood running warm in a ribbon under his shirt. He remembered his wife's death, the desert that followed, and how violence had promised him meaning and delivered only echo. He thumped Silas's shoulder with the Colt. "Stand," he ordered. "Walk." "What?" Silas blinked. "You're going to the sheriff," Eli said. "Alive! And you're going to sign a confession with that pretty ring off your finger." Silas's smile returned, lazy and poisonous. Somewhere beyond the half-circle of light a rifle clicked. "You think the law's yours?" "I think a town's had enough of your kind," Eli said. And he wasn't talking to Silas anymore. He raised his voice. "Ash River," he called into the dark. "You hear me? I got your wolf on a rope." Silence. Then a window shuttered open. Another lantern flickered. Boots, not hostile this time, crunched from 3 directions. Men whose crops had been taxed by fear. Women whose wells had been priced by promises. Old Sheriff Calder, 60 of a day, with a white mustache like tumbleweed and a badge that hadn't shined in years, stepped into the lantern circle with a scattergun he held like a memory he'd finally chosen to keep. "We heard gunfire," he said. "We heard we was late." "Not too late," Eli said. He shoved Silas toward Calder. "Get his men," he added, nodding to the shadows. "They're bearing witness to their own guilt." Calder's jaw tightened. "Boys," he called, and the town's boys, gray-haired many of them, moved from doorways and fences, guns steady, faces steady. The kerosene kegs were rolled aside and doused. Rook was rope-tied and hauled, groaning. The others were collected, stripped of pistols and of swagger both. The rain slackened to a gentle patter, like somebody finally setting a pan to soak after a long, hard supper. Inside, June lay her ear to Mara's chest and listened like one listens for a far whistle. "She's there," she whispered. "She's still there." Eli cleaned and stitched with a rough steadiness that would make a doctor frown and a preacher nod. He brewed chicory and honey water and fed Mara a thimble at a time until the tremble in her breath settled. When her good eye found his, it was not a stranger's eye. "Thank you," she murmured, "for coming." He shrugged, the motion pulling sore muscle. "It was the right road," he said. Silas Mott signed a confession by lantern light in Sheriff Calder's office before dawn, jawbone ring set on the desk like the tooth of a beast finally pulled. He looked smaller without his coat. Men tend to, once you take away the weather they carry around them. Rook and the others were locked in the stone-cold cells where even lies go stiff. A week later, the river rose, spring melt coming late, and the sound of it through the willows was like the world washing its hands. Mara walked to the bank with June and Eli. She still moved careful, ribs wrapped under her dress, but color had come back to her face. June held both their hands and swung between them like a bell on a Sunday. Eli wore a clean shirt under the same old duster, hat brim mended, scar bright on his brow like a slash of truth. "You'll stay?" June asked, looking up at Eli. The question was a leaf, fragile and green. Eli studied the river, the way it took rocks and sand and made them smooth over time. "I'll be where I'm needed," he said. Then he looked down at June, at Mara, at the little cabin that now had a new door and no smell of kerosene, and added softer, "I'm needed here for a time." Mara squeezed his hand. "You were alone too long," she said. "Lonesome turns men hard, but it doesn't have to make them cruel." From town, boots crunched, not men coming to take, but neighbors coming to build. Lantern light flickered in their hands, though daylight had already claimed the hills. Old habits are slow to set down. Sheriff Calder tipped his hat. "We'll set a notice," he said. "Silas goes to trial where a judge eats pride for breakfast." Eli nodded. "Make it honest." Calder's mustache twitched. "With you standing as witness, I reckon it will be." The rope on Eli's saddle creaked as his horse shifted. Ted sounded different now, less like a noose, more like a promise. He looked at the camera that wasn't there but always is in the mind of a teller and said, "Some men think owning a river makes them God, but a river belongs to what it touches, and what it touches belongs to each other. If you were in June's place, 8 years old with rain in your braids and a mother bleeding on a bed, would you run into the dark to knock on a stranger's door? Or would you hide and hope cruelty forgets your name? If this story shook something awake in you, remember to keep that lantern lit. Like this story and subscribe for the next Wild West tale. And if you want to see how the next battle unfolds, don't miss the next story. Subscribe now.